Remember when we did the lower leg, the ankle was really important to getting it and understanding the form? Well, it's kind of the same way with the lower arm. Only we want to make sure we know where the elbow is and the form of the elbow, and we also want to make sure we understand how the wrist is working and the forms that we need to be aware of there. Now, I'll preface this. We're not going to get in and really detail out all of these parts. We're going to leave the fingers pretty rough and just move on to the rest of this, because there's a lot that we could get lost in form-wise. And I want you to be aware, sculpting things like this take time. There's no question about it. There's no shortcut. So let's start by looking at the elbow. What's the structure of the elbow? Because this is a sculpting problem for us. How are we going to represent this? Is it a simple cylinder? Or what's the mechanism at play? Well, let me give you a sense of the mechanism as I understand it. So you've got the head of the humerus coming down, right? You've got, I think if I remember right, let's do it about here. You've got a slight dip in form for the tricep, and then it's going to come around and have the form go the other way for the bicep. Alright, fair enough. Okay, that's a simple representation of it. From a back view, keep in mind that there is what's called the epicondyles on either side. So we're looking at what's called the lateral epicondyle. Okay, that's on the outside. Lateral means outside, medial means inside. Okay, I'm going to keep reiterating these things. Anyways, the ulna comes in from the back view, and so this is our ulna from a side. But what's really important to keep in mind is that the ulna, or the shaft of that humerus, that sits in the joint for the ulna. So there's this really specific shape I want you to be aware of internally. Okay, now let's do that in 3D a little bit. Let's rotate this around from the back and see if we can do that quickly in 3D. So we've got the epicondyles, okay, the humerus, okay, and then we're going to have the ulna wrapping around and with a particular shape moving down. There we go. So a lot of things happen here that you need to be aware of. Okay, there's muscles that are flowing from the epicondyle. This is the lateral epicondyle, so the muscles I'm drawing right here are called the extensors. Oops. Let's do that in white. And then above the lateral epicondyle, about a third the way up the shaft, this is where you get what's called the ridge muscles. Okay, and I'll write that down. So, ridge muscles. Don't sweat the names of them. Okay, the first thing that you need to understand is the simplified form, simplified understanding. And then on the other side, you're getting what's called the flexors. Those are the three parts of the forearm that you really need to be thinking about in terms of the muscle. Alright, the other parts are things like the ulna, okay, and then we're going to get down to the radius and the styloid process in a bit. But keep these guys in your mind, and let's stop for a moment and sculpt the skeletal structure that we need. So I'm going to keep it roughly in the same place, and what I'm going to do is with the clay brush, or we can use clay buildup, it's on a hotkey. I'm going to push in and start to separate out that ulna, remember, from the lateral epicondyle. And then I'm going to separate out the ridge muscles from that epicondyle as well. So I just want to have a sense that I've got this epicondyle hanging out in here, this separate form. And then I've got this other separate form, the ulna, which is hanging out as well. Let's look at that from below and just be clear. The epicondyles are going to be these little lines. Let's say this cylinder, okay? And then the ulna is going to be wrapping around there, moving down. Okay, and this is disappearing up in that way. So keep the whole straight line in mind. Once we've got the lateral epicondyle, we're going to move over and make sure that we've got the medial epicondyle. So I'm separating out the medial epicondyle from the bicep in this case, or the brachialis, you choose. Separating it out from the ulna in the back. And then let's just carve it in. There we go. I've got work to do, but I know where that is now. I know where the epicondyle is. And that's important. So it might not look right. It might look like there's a bunch of problems with it. But at least I've got a note in there that says, hey, something's going on there. Now let's go in and start to sculpt some of the forms that we need to sculpt to kind of make more sense of it. So we mentioned the ridge muscles above it. Okay, I'm going to separate the ridge muscles a little bit more, and then we're going to have the extensors. But when we get to this point, it becomes a problem because we don't know exactly where these guys are going. So once you've got the elbow established, your work is actually to come down and start to figure out what's happening with the elbow. So for example, what I've already started to do is actually wrong. I've started to rotate these guys around so they're actually heading in this direction. But now let me go through and document what you want to be doing. So we've got the ulna, and it becomes this little tiny point in space down here. This is called the styloid process of the ulna. Okay, and there's more than one styloid process, so you just need to know that. And then we are going to get the radius. Okay, nice little bone, and up here it's this little tiny thing. It's going to be on the outside, and it's connecting up along the lines of the it's connecting right up there with the ulna. Let me just say that. It is small up in the top area, and kind of inverses the relationship of what we've got with the ulna. So the ulna is larger in the top, smaller in the bottom. The radius is completely opposite. So let's just get the form of that intact. Okay, so that's the basic relationship that we have going on in terms of the bones. Now in terms of the muscles, we've got our epicondyle up here, right? I'm just going to leave it as a dot. You have the extensors. Okay, the extensors are going to flow all the way to the ulna, down and into the top of the hand. Okay, there's a lot of extensors. There's the digitorum, the extensor carpi, ulnaris, all of that. But we're just going to keep them really simple. Just trying to get a small indicator of form in there. Then there's the ridge muscles, which we've already said kind of wrap around. And the ridge muscles come down and attach to the thumb. So they're coming down and attaching to the inside, the palm side of the thumb. And then the flexors are on the back side of that. Flexors are going to be these guys coming in and adding some volume back there. We're going to look at those when we look at the inside. So I need to establish the elbow, not the elbow, sorry, the wrist. Clay brush or clay buildup. Let's get the styloid process. That's my first form. And in order to really get it, I need to make sure that I have a clean line from the elbow. So I'm going to start to carve in and make sure that's a nice clean line. Looking down it. If If you really want to be sure that it's a clean straight line, I mean it's really not a clean line at the end of the day, but if you really want to be sure, I can introduce you to another feature. We can go into stroke, we can turn backtrack on and turn line on, and then you can go from one point to the next and track back over the top. Okay, do the same thing, pull out, and now I'm going to press Alt, and that's going to give me a nice clean line. Absolutely verifiably a clean line. We're going to end up messing up that clean line, but it's kind of nice to have it. So I'm going to come into stroke and turn backtrack off. Alright, now I can go back into clay buildup, and we can work on getting the extensors built up, touching that ulna, but most importantly coming down and connecting in here with the arm. Now the radius is already kind of indicated. I've already got the planes established for it. So I'm just going to fine-tune that a little bit to separate the tendons of the arm from the bone of the radius. Okay, you can do the same thing here. Just start to separate out that styloid process, the ulna, from everything below it, which is going to be flexors anyways. Alright, and move them on down. Now, keep in mind when you're working on a forearm, bone is the bottom half, muscle is the top half. That's where your volume's going to be. So, I'm going to make sure that it's a little less voluminous down here, a little more voluminous up at the top. And make sure that's coming right from that epicondyle. Ridge muscle could use a little work now. The ridge muscle really needs a little help though, because I need to conceptually figure out a few things. So what I like to do, where I'm doing this green line, is I like to draw a line that separates the ridge muscle from the flexors. So make sure you draw that line in, and you can do that with any brush. But basically you want a straight-ish line heading down to the bone. Okay. There we go. Pulling down. And I'm coming from the medial epicondyle, and it's flowing out to the ulna on one side, the radius on the other side. And so let's start to carve the space in between. Yeah, a little like that. Okay, plesius muscles. Okay, we're not going to get too much into it. Just want to look up these. Adductor plesius longus. They're going to be great for the skinniness here. Tendons are moving into the thumb, all of that stuff. So I'm just going to give them a little hit. Extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor carpi radialis longus. Once I learned these muscles, I actually say them as I sculpt them, and it just helps. Okay, separating them from the tricep and redrawing the tricep. There we go. Alright, looks crazy. Looks like there's a bunch of gunk, but that's the division of the forearm muscles. I'm going to add a little bit of form in a couple of places. I might make the elbow really dominant, so I'm going to make that medial epicondyle really large. Really emphasize the skinny nature of our model when the joints are larger. Yeah, let's use ZBrush. That's a nice fast way to cheat. Okay, so we got a lot of stuff written up. Smooth it all down if you want. Okay, it really helps to smooth intelligently, not just globally too. So what I'm going to do is come in and I'm going to smooth out the top of the hand, working to create a specific plane, working to really emphasize the extensors. Okay, I'm going to sculpt or smooth out the plesius and the radius just to get it so that it's a hit. I'm not looking for much more. And then I'm going to smooth out the ridge muscles. And again, doing it intelligently so that they still retain form. Okay, a little bit more. There we go. Looks a little better than when I did it the first time, right? So keep that in mind. Smoothing intelligently is part of your sculpting tool set, and you're going to want to make sure that you're mastering that. Now we got a little bit of work to do in the hands to make it a little better, so I think we'll do that. Again, keeping in mind, you know, we're taking a cursory look at these guys, so not a robust look, just a cursory look. Okay, I'm just making the bicep thinner, and so I'm using trim dynamic to do that. And I'm going to use trim dynamic to just cut off some of it. Yeah. Just to make him look thinner. There we go. Move brush as well. And what about that? Yeah. Okay. Different stages of development. I love this. Very Frankenstein. Probably time for us to go and melt everything together before your brain starts to melt.